Welcome to Lesson 1, Mindset of Wealth. In this video, we'll be covering how the wealthy think and key things that you need to keep in mind as you go down this journey of building your own digital bank. So in this lesson, we'll cover things like long-term investing strategies or the importance of thinking long-term assets over liabilities. We'll go into each one of these topics and give you more insight on how to shape your mind to build generational wealth. So let's get started. If we look at history, the most successful people in the world, if we look at the richest list in the world, the most successful people are long-term investors. We look at Warren Buffett, we look at, Charlie Munger, we look at even Jeff Bezos himself, right? These are all very strategic investors, and their focus is always on the long game because statistics and data prove overwhelmingly that if you hold good assets for a time frame of approximately 10 years or more, you start to see exponential returns. So that long-term time frame oftentimes, or actually every time for the most part, beats those traders who typically want to jump in and out of the market daily. Right? Investors, long-term, traders, short-term, the most wealthy people in the world, long-term, right? So really important to emphasize the importance of having a long-term prospect on any asset that you hold if you truly wish to build generational wealth. So another key point to take note from some of the most successful investors in the world is that they acquire assets, right? For anybody who's ever read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, we understand definition of assets and liabilities. So let's go over that, right? So assets are considered anything that appreciates in value or appreciates more in value that it costs you, or generates more income or revenue that it actually costs you to maintain that asset. That's very simple understanding. So if it's costing you more money than it's making you, it's not considered an asset. So that's an easy walk into what a liability is. A liability is anything that costs you more money than it's bringing in. So a good example of something that may be costing you more money than it's bringing in currently is a primary residence. Most people buy houses, right? And they assume that it's automatically considered an asset. At a certain point, it's considered an asset, but as long as they have a huge amount of debt and that asset or that house is not producing any income for them, at that moment, it's considered a liability. So it's very important to understand the difference between liabilities and assets. And the wealthy focus on acquiring more assets to cover their normal living expenses. That brings me to my next point, which is what it means to be wealthy, right? We talk about what we want to be wealthy. We want to be rich. We want to have that freedom, right? But what does that really mean? In simple terms, being wealthy is pretty much the amount of time that you can live at your current standard or quality of life without having to work. Your assets are actually paying for your lifestyle. That's what wealth is determined by. So the key factor in that equation is actually time. So how long you can last based on the current income being produced from your assets. That's how you determine how wealthy you are. And that's what our objective is. So the next mental characteristic that we see the wealthy really take to heart is they focus on their area of competence. What they do is they focus on areas that they have a lot of knowledge in, and they stay away from areas that they have very limited knowledge in, right? But that's not to say that you can't make your area of competence with enough research and enough consistency and focus, right? But it's very important that you put your money, you put your investments in things that you yourself understand. And that's how the wealthy are getting more wealthy, because they're doubling down on what they already understand, and they're getting better and better every year. They're not jumping from industry to industry, from this thing to that thing. They're going deeper and not wider. So really focus on your area of competence. As it applies to building wealth in the crypto space or using Bitcoin, it would behoove you to really dive as deep as you can into this new digital economy, because it's really a first of its kind. We've never really had the opportunities that we have in the crypto space, and everyone is pretty much on the same playing field because it's such a new space. So if you make this your area of competence, right, you have a very high chance of success because right now your competition is lower than it is in any of the other crowded marketplaces. So whether you choose crypto or some other industry to focus on, make sure you dive as deep as possible so that your knowledge is always increasing so that you have that competitive edge. In today's world, the information age, he who has the highest quality of information or he who has access to the highest quality information the fastest typically has the unfair advantage. And you want to make sure that you always have an unfair advantage as an investor.